Hey YouTube, Jonathan here, and we're going to give this UK video another try. I posted one before and there was some sort of error. It would not show more than the first 5 minutes. I tried reformatting and uploading that same video, same issue, so I'm just going to create a new one and get this one uploaded. So if you're wondering why the nation videos are at least initially, not in the right order. I'll see if I can get that fixed. But initially, they won't be in the right order. It's because I'm having to film the British one after getting the other ones posted. So with that out of the way, let's just introduce this. This is the British video, as I'm sure you figured out already. And we're going to be looking at Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition with the 1942 setup. We will not be incorporating national objectives into this video. I haven't been for the other nations in this series. I hope to create a new series in the near future that will incorporate those, but for this series I just want to look at the very basic game. If you are familiar with other versions of Axis and Allies and you just want to pick this up and you want to look at the board and figure things out and move the units around, but you don't want to worry about the extras, this strategy video is focusing on that approach. So as the United Kingdom, you are spread out across the world, up here, and then through the Mediterranean and Africa, over to India, and down in Australia. Now, unlike some other versions, you will notice that with the 1942 setup, you do not have any sort of a navy down here. You do have a fighter that starts on Australia. Now, whether you're playing a 41 or a 42 setup, in either case, Japan goes before you. So, in a 42 setup like we're doing here, Japan goes first, then the Soviet Union, then Germany, then England, Italy, the United States. In fact, England, Italy, and the United States are always going to go 4th, 5th, and 6th, regardless of which setup you use. And Russia, the Soviet Union, will always go 2nd. Really, it's just Japan and Germany that swap. So in a 41 game, Germany goes first, Soviet Union, then Japan. In a 42 setup, it goes Japan, Soviet Union, Germany. All the other countries stay exactly in the same turn order. So regardless, England is always going to go 4th, and it's always going to go after Japan. Now, we're going to make some assumptions about what Germany and Japan are going to do. If they do something different than what I describe, you may have some new options available, or you may not have some options available that I'm going to describe. And that's just one of the things that comes with a country that doesn't go really early in turn order, is you do have to play some things by ear. So the assumptions we're going to make are that Japan has attacked our fleet down here and wiped us out. We'll start there. So what should we do about that? Well, there's not a whole lot we can do. We have this destroyer here, but if we move it this way, it's just going to get killed. We can potentially, if there's a lone transport, maybe Italy or Germany moved a transport up here, and they weren't paying attention to turn order, we could go up and kill it. We could try and break out of here and make our getaway. If for some reason Japan doesn't attack here, we could consolidate if we think that defending the coastline here is going to be valuable to us. Or we could have the destroyer go this way, and we could have this fleet join with it down here to try and consolidate it, but out of the path of the Japanese fleet if they're still hanging around over here. Now, in this area of the world, we also want to keep an eye on how vulnerable India is. And it may be more vulnerable or less vulnerable depending on what Japan decides it wants to do. We do want to keep in mind, in addition to any forces they have in Burma, they do have one transport. Depending on where it is, it could potentially land in India. They have a lot of air forces, so we need to see how many of them can hit India. We do have an AA gun, But if Japan can break through India early on, losing a fighter or even two is probably going to be worth it. And they are going to have a few coastal bombardments. They've got a battleship here, they have one up here, they have a cruiser here. Depending on where they position those at the end of their first turn, they may be able to get some or all of them to India, or maybe none of them to India. And so you want to be watching out for that. If after accounting for all of that, India still looks like it's going to be in good shape, at least until your next turn as England, then you might consider putting a factory down here. Now, I say that because if Japan is in any way in a position where they could make a decent attack on India and potentially take it, when they see that factory go down, they are definitely, or almost definitely, going to be trying to take it out. Because, hey, it's a free factory for them, and if they leave that there and you start reinforcing, this is their main avenue to get through, is down through India. We've talked before about how China is going to be a lot slower than normal, going through the Soviet Union, a lot slower, a lot less productive for them. This is going to be where they're going to want to attack, and if they see that factory there, they do not want you to be able to slow them down here, and if they can take it, they are definitely going to try, if they think that they have a chance. However, if they've not positioned themselves in such a way that they can make a reasonable attack on it, that would be the time to build a factory. Now, you don't necessarily even need to focus on building heavy offense and trying to push this way. You just need to try and hold them at bay, just as China does, just as the Soviet Union slows them down. You're going to just keep them from moving through here very quickly. If the opportunity presents itself, you can attack that way. But mostly, you're just here to make sure Japan can't push through as they're hitting the Soviet Union from this side. And it keeps this production out of their hands as well. You do have this infantry over here you can move over. If for some reason this fleet didn't get destroyed, you could swing over, grab these guys, and bring them over if you want to. That does leave Egypt a little bit weaker. So typically, I'll move that infantry over here and that infantry and artillery over here to reinforce. Because Germany and or Italy are probably eyeing Egypt, moving in reinforcements or preparing themselves to amphibiously assault on their next turn. You also have this transport down here. You could move him this way, but if those Japanese fighters on the carrier are lingering around, they're going to take out that transport really easily, so you're probably going to want to move it over this way. Maybe pick up those guys, move them up a little bit faster if the situation calls for it. You could potentially, you could move them here and get them a little closer to Egypt. You do still have Anglo-Egypt Sudan, which is a separate territory from Egypt, so they're not going to be able to drop off here and take one turn. It's going to take them a little longer. But that transport's going to get them up a little bit faster than if you just try and have them march up through Egypt. Up through Africa. You do also, don't want to forget about it, mentioned it before, this fighter over here. You can start trying to bring him over here to help defend India as well. Now, as we move across the board here, we are going to assume that we have lost this fleet here as well as that fleet there. This fleet's probably going to be okay. And so we are going to want to rebuild our fleet. I prefer building a carrier. The reason being, we've got two fighters here already, and we can just boom them right over to the carrier, and suddenly we have a really strong defensive force, and that's what we're going to need early in the game. We could either put that fleet here, move this fleet over and join it, have that fleet here, or, especially if the Americans are going to come in, we could put it right here. But we always need to be on the lookout for where the German fighters are and where this navy of theirs is. Are either of these territories in striking distance? And if so, at least on the first turn, we probably do not want to position our ships in such a place that they can be attacked. We probably are not strong enough relative to the strength of the German forces to be able to survive an all-out onslaught if the Germans have positioned themselves in such a way to hit us. we're going to want to put our ships somewhere else so that they can't be savagely attacked on Germany's second turn before we get another chance to reinforce. You also need to be on the lookout for a potential sea lion. So amongst all of these ships, you probably can't see it from that distance, so we'll zoom in a little bit. Amongst these ships, we've got a transport over there. We also have a cruiser. So that's a couple units that can be dropped off, as well as a coastal bombardment, as well as whatever fighters and bombers Germany has. And if they do make a move that I liked to make, then they built a carrier here, that's going to make it even easier. Without that carrier, they have to choose between, do I want fighters over here against England, or do I want fighters over here against Russia? Fighters on this carrier allow them to go in either direction of their choosing, and then they can just land them back on the carrier. And so we've got that to worry about. Depending on the situation down here, we potentially have another German transport that could come up here, so we have up to 2 transports that could hit us, as well as all that air power and a German cruiser coastal bombardment. Depending on what Italy did on its turn, it could potentially load up a couple guys on a transport if it happens to have its navy over here. If it's here or further this way, it can't do it. But if its navy happens to be here, they could also pick up a couple guys, drop them off there, and they have several coastal bombardments over here. You want to be very careful about that. Now, the U.S. does have a couple transports. They could drop off guys. They could fly a second bomber over. They could fly a fighter over to help defend you. You can also use your air power. If the German Navy is right here, you could fly everything down, try and wipe it out. Your bomber can make it back. Your fighters would have to land on Gibraltar. And then you have to consider, do you think that the Italians are going to try and do an amphibious assault with their coastal bombardments to try and wipe out your fighters? And then you've lost your fighters, and that isn't, you're not in a good position. One thing that you could also try is using your air power to come over here. You won't be able to kill the sub, but you could potentially kill this transport and the cruiser and the destroyer, which means that even if Germany has one transport over here, it doesn't have a coast. It just has the one and has no coastal bombardment. Now, if you do that, you probably are going to want to build another fighter, just because you're bound to lose at least one. You could lose multiple planes potentially in that attack, and so you want to replace them. You're not going to have enough to build a carrier and a fighter and a factory down in India, so you're going to have to gauge that. If you're really worried about a sea lion, you could, but your ships are protected over here, Germany can't really get to them, you could just build the carrier, as long as they don't have subs that can come out and hit you. Or you could save a bunch of your money, and then on the next turn put down a much stronger navy if you can't really position yourself over here that you such that your fleet is going to be okay. But you definitely want to be on the lookout for sea lion with these German transports that are lurking out here, and that German air power. If you're going to move two fighters away to land on that carrier, it is going to weaken you up here. So you definitely want to be on the lookout for that. And that German carrier doesn't guarantee sea lion, but it also does make it a lot easier because now the Germans have at least 2 planes they don't have to sacrifice and say they aren't going to send them over here at all on turn 2 because they're thinking about sea lion. They can go either way, and so you got to be aware of it and be on the lookout for it. So that is a rundown of the United Kingdom and some things that I like to pay attention to in this version of Axis and Allies. You do have territories flung all over the world, and you can't necessarily do everything. Fortunately, all options are not going to appear as equally viable in any given game. In one game, India might look good to build a factory, but you don't look good over here to build a strong fleet. So maybe in that case you build the factory, but you save the rest of your money and build a stronger fleet next time. Maybe India doesn't look like it's a place you want to build a factory. Well, in that case, you can dump all of your production over here to build a much stronger fleet earlier on and start going after Germany. You do want to make sure you coordinate with the United States if the U.S. is going to be going after Germany as well, or at the very least with these couple of ships it has over here, unless it's totally moving everything to the Pacific, because this fleet here is not enough to protect itself. And so if this is going to be the extent of the German war effort over here, they are going to need your help protecting. But they do have a destroyer to devote to the cause, and so they can toss that your way to assist. So those are my thoughts on England. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that it doesn't have the same issues with uploading that the other one does. Never had those issues with these videos before, so I'm not quite sure what caused it, but hopefully second video is the charm.